going on, guys? Today we're going to critique GojiMan's video, Saturated Fat for Vegans. Is it worse than animal saturated fat? And we're probably just going to watch this whole video for the most part, and then we'll just debunk it with the studies at the end. Maybe not. Maybe I'll change my mind.
Hashtag Ask GojiMan. Are plant-based saturated fats any better for vegans than animal-based saturated fats? Great question. Let's get to it. Roll the titles. Welcome back, it's good to see you all again. If we haven't met before, then hi, I'm GojiMan. I'm currently finishing a Masters in Nutrition and qualifying as a nutritionist, and next year I'll be studying for a PhD in nutritional science. I do plant-based
If anyone actually had an understanding of nutrition and how crooked like the USDA is and all these dietetic organizations are, it seems like you're almost discrediting yourself at the video, or like that you're about to be like some sort of minion sent to us by the USDA or the WHO, the World Health Organization, to preach their knowledge. I don't
nutrition videos every other day in which I answer your health questions under the hashtag Ask GojiMan. So if you have a question for me, then hashtag Ask GojiMan in the comments below, and I'll choose one of these questions to answer in my next video.
Listen, I understand my camera goes out of focus a lot myself too, but this guy is just sitting there. I'm usually talking like a crazy Italian guy, moving my hands all over the place, so I don't really know what's.
So without further ado, to the question. So fats are made up of chains of fatty acids. All foods contain fats, and these can either be classed as saturated, monounsaturated or polyunsaturated fats. Many foods contain all three different types of fats, but it is the fat that is present in the most significant quantity that will determine its overall classification. For example, flaxseed contains saturated fats, monounsaturated fats and polyunsaturated fats, but it's the polyunsaturated fats that make up the majority of the fat, which is why flax seeds are classified as polyunsaturated rich food. So fats have many important roles in the body. They make up the cell wall membranes, they help you absorb the fat-soluble vitamins, so A, D, E and K, and they give you energy when your glucose reserves have depleted. And they also keep your skin and hair healthy. Basically, they are involved in most processes in the body. Now,
Alright, I don't want to insult this guy or his intelligence or anything, but one thing I've noticed in his videos is he literally cuts the clip every like 5 or 10 seconds. It's almost like you ask him a question, he Googles it, and he's literally just reading stuff off of a chart and has to cut the clip every 10 seconds to read it and go over it. Just seems weird to me. One other interesting thing, though, is in regards to polyunsaturated, monounsaturated, and saturated fat profiles of foods, it's interesting that it depends on what the animal eats will determine the fat ratio of the actual fat in the animal. Just something really interesting to think about, that you could have pastured pork versus conventional pork, and the pastured pork has a fatty acid profile that's pretty much the same as beef, whereas the conventional pork is like grain-fed chicken. It's just pretty interesting.
I don't want to get all sciencey and geeky here, but you just need to know that saturated fats have no double bonds in their chemical structure and are therefore saturated with hydrogen atoms. And this is why saturated fats are solid at room temperature. Saturated rich foods include beef, poultry, pork, plant oils such as coconut oil, dairy products, processed meats, and junk foods such as crisps, biscuits, and cakes. The World Health Organization
Seriously, like this, I could not watch these videos. This guy cuts it every 10 seconds, and he's literally like reading information off of a.
Recommends that saturated fatty acids should be replaced with polyunsaturated fatty acids in the diet, and the total intake of saturated fatty acids should not exceed 10%, and that's 10% of your total calories for the day. This recommendation is because of the known risks of saturated fats and their link to heart disease, cancer and other chronic diseases. All you need to remember is that saturated fats, depending on how much you eat, can be inflammatory in the body. And it is this inflammation that is often the driving force behind many of our chronic leading diseases.
Inflammation is way bigger than saturated fat, and it's a very complex topic, and for him to sum it up in two sentences without explaining why is, to me, that's, I don't know what to, like, do I have to respond to that?
And contrary to what some people tell you, mainly from the paleo and carnivore camps, saturated fats are not essential in the body. Only omega-3 and omega-6 fats are essential.
So saturated fats are required to metabolize fat-soluble vitamins, and fat-soluble vitamins are only present in saturated fats unless you're getting them in unnatural ways through supplements, and even if you did get the plant form of the vitamin, you still need saturated fat to metabolize it. This is that is that is another oversimplification of that. And omega 3 versus omega 6, I made a video on flax converting into DHA. I didn't even touch on the omega 6, but there has never been a study that shows consuming flax or chia seeds can raise blood levels of DHA. That's why algae supplements are usually referenced in this argument.
Now, I don't want to spend too much time on mono and polyunsaturated fats. You just need to remember that the chemical structure is different from saturated fats, and as you move away from saturation, then the fats become liquid at room temperature.
So although that is true to some degree, high quality animal foods tend to be incredibly high in monounsaturated fat, as well as they do have saturated fat, but a lot of it is monounsaturated, some polyunsaturated. That's what we see in wild caught fish, in super high quality pastured beef. So for him to brush off and not mention that there is a ton of monounsaturated fat in properly raised animal foods is a little bit misleading.
And this is one of the main reasons why these types of fats are health promoting and anti-inflammatory in the body.
So if polyunsaturated fats and monounsaturated fats, which are present in wild caught fish and pastured animals, are good for you, then how can you talk about saturated? This is very contradictory.
So the majority of vegans who reduce saturated fats in their diet and increase mono and polyunsaturated fats, well, they do very well from a health perspective. These people can normally take the short-chain omega-3s from plant-based sources, so ALA, and convert them into the long-chain omega-3s, so EPA and DHA. So if you are not overly familiar with omega-3s, then you will have probably heard people talking about EPA and DHA when talking about fish and fish oil. Preformed EPA and DHA aren't available from plant-based foods, with a couple of exceptions, so the body has to convert plant-based ALA sources into EPA and DHA. EPA and DHA are essential for optimal health, and I've done a video on marine phytoplankton, which is a great vegan source of EPA and DHA, so be sure to check out the video here. So we are all good, right? Well, not quite. So you've probably seen in the media over the last few years studies which show that vegans and plant-based dieters who are apparently deficient in long-chain omega-3s. The media then sensationalise these stories, and once again vegan diets are deficient. What these people fail to tell you is that there are large groups of people who have genetic mutations in their FADS1 gene. This gene is responsible for converting short-chain polyunsaturated fats to the longer-chain forms of EPA and DHA. When you have this mutation, you need to give your body the preformed versions of EPA and DHA, otherwise you could run into deficiency and develop health conditions because your body won't produce enough of these essential fats. So it's worth testing your EPA and DHA if you are vegan or plant-based, particularly if you are Chinese, Japanese, Hispanic or Native American, as these populations have a 40 to 90% chance of having a single nucleotide polymorphism. And remember that it's very easy to supplement with plant-based active forms of EPA and DHA.
So that pretty much says that a vegan diet is not possible in nature, as half the world can't even turn the preformed DHA into, or the preformed omegas into DHA. You know, I mean, to me, that's very glaringly obvious that if you need to take a modern vegan supplement, and don't let me get started on how they actually make algae oil, but like.
So I went off on a bit of a tangent there, so back to the question of whether plant-based saturated fats are bad for us. And the answer very much depends on how much saturated fat you are consuming in your diet. Another factor that needs to be taken into account is there are different types of saturated fats, such as lauric and stearic acid, and some of these saturated fats have more saturation than others. So from a general perspective, saturated fats are fine when eaten in small amounts. So for example, in dairy products they only have small amounts of the healthy omega-3s, a little more in terms of monounsaturated fats, but lots of saturated fats. And the same can be seen in many meats and also junk foods. In contrast, in nuts and seeds you typically see high levels of omega-3s and high levels of monounsaturated fats. Saturated fats only account for 5 to 10% of the total fat contained, and they fall in line with the World Health Organization's 10% guidelines. I'm not overly concerned with saturated fats when eaten as part of plant-based whole foods. They are packaged how nature intended. They become a...
So, oh my god, I'm losing brain cells today. Lumping in conventionally raised dairy with junk food and meat is pretty goddamn stupid. I mean, that's a very stupid analogy to make. I'm not even talking on that point, but he says that the the plant foods are packaged how nature intended. First of all, those plant foods only grow in very specific areas of the world. Not everyone can get an avocado, buddy. And if you're saying that these foods are packaged the way nature intended, meat and animal foods are packaged the way nature intended in the most calorically available amount possible. Very this guy is contradicting himself. This whole video to anyone who has, a reasonable background in the understanding the nutrient content of animal foods versus plant foods.
Problem when isolated, such as olive oil, coconut oil, etc., etc. Many macro and micronutrients are the same. They become a problem when isolated, such as olive oil, coconut oil, etc., etc. Many macro and micronutrients are the same. Isolate sugar, you have a problem. Isolate protein, you have a problem. Olive oil and similar fats and oils are often lauded in the media as health foods. They might be less dangerous than saturated fats found in animal products because of the saturation levels, but don't for 1 minute think they are healthy. I've done a video on oils, so be sure to check it out here. Now, these comments might infuriate some of you who eat these products, and you will probably say these are healthy. So I have a challenge for you. The gold standard of nutritional science and research are randomized controlled clinical trials. If one of you can find a large study that shows olive oil and coconut oil are healthy, then I will do a video naked. And you don't want to see that. I will let you into a little secret. These studies don't exist. The only studies that show health benefits are small observational or meta-analysis studies where cause and effect isn't shown. So essentially they are industry funded to sell products. So that's the end of today's video. I hope you all enjoy.
Every study is industry funded. How do you think someone gets the funding for a study? These people are clowns, man. Every study is industry funded, and he doesn't link any studies in his description. So if you're going to say that I can't use meta-analysis and other studies, but you don't link any studies, I don't really give a shit what you have to say. So let's, before I lose any more brain cells, let's just look at some studies that are, I don't know if they're really directly related to this, but they're as related as possible in regards to saturated fat. And there's a whole bunch of things we could talk about, but we're just going to, I'll link these in the comments, unlike this gentleman. This study is diet and plasma cholesterol in 99 bank men, and these bankers had drastically different cholesterol levels, ranging from, what was it? The cholesterol level varied from 154 to 324, and they all had relatively similar consumption from animal foods. So with how large the variance was in their dietary cholesterol intake, the plasma cholesterol, and this isn't just dietary cholesterol intake, this is just animal foods and fat in general. There was a large variance in the cholesterol levels despite having similar amounts of animal food. So with that huge variance, they couldn't say that, dietarily speaking, that the people that had high cholesterol didn't necessarily consume more animal foods, and the people that had low cholesterol didn't necessarily consume less. I'll link that study. This one is daily nutrition intake and serum lipid levels. The summary is the mean daily consumption of each dietary component was virtually identical in all tertiles for men and women, but differed between sexes. Cholesterol and triglyceride levels were unrelated to quality, quantity, or proportions of fat, carbohydrate, or protein consumed in a 24-hour recall period. Same thing, no link between dietary cholesterol and what was this? Was this fat consumption or was this? Yeah, it was fat. It was all of the macronutrients. This is one systematic review and meta-analysis of clinical trials of the effects of low-carbohydrate diets on cardiovascular risk factors. And then low-density lipoprotein, cholesterol, and creatinine did not change significantly, whereas limited data exists concerning plasmic uric acid. LCD was shown to have favorable effects on the body and major cardiovascular risk factors. However, the effects on long-term health are unknown. So what this says is actually the inverse. Low-carbohydrate, high-fat diets improved cardiovascular risk markers. Conclusion of this: meta-analysis of prospective cohort studies evaluating the association of saturated fat with cardiovascular disease. There is no significant evidence for concluding that dietary saturated fat is associated with increased risk of heart disease or cardiovascular disease. Dietary intake of saturated fat acids and mortality from cardiovascular disease in Japanese. Conclusion: SFA intake, saturated fatty acid intake, was inversely associated. So we're seeing the opposite from mortality from stroke, including hemorrhage and other stroke types. And then this is another one. Normal plasma cholesterol in a man who eats 25 eggs a day. So whether it's saturated fat, cholesterol, whatever you're eating, any of these studies, to me, there is no direct link between dietary cholesterol or dietary saturated fat and serum cholesterol. Those things have largely to do with carbohydrate intake, metabolic damage, activity levels, other foods they're eating that might cause inflammation. There's so many factors that go into your hormones, how, someone who has had low testosterone their whole life might have high cholesterol. There's so many factors that go into uh, it's very misleading for him to say. I don't even know what basis in general is even, saturated fat and cholesterol have no association with cardiovascular disease, and cholesterol doesn't matter. Where are these people? How are these people just saying all the time that saturated fat is bad for you? What is the basis of your argument? You're saying that people that there might be studies that say, okay, people with high cholesterol and high LDL have higher risks for certain diseases, but there's also studies showing the opposite. And it's just, to me, this whole circle jerk of studies and research never gets anywhere, because there's studies that favor both. There's both industries in regards to vegan focused ones and meat focused ones are funding various studies that show both perspectives. So at what point are we gonna say, and people say, oh, logic and indigenous diets and thinking of what we would have naturally ate has no place. We need to go through science, but science has no clue what's going on outside of basic metabolic function. It has no clue in the world of nutrition. So hopefully this, I honestly thought this guy was a little bit more on the ball, but I guess not. So the one thing that really bothers me is that it's literally like this guy is reading, he's reading off a script, and why does he need to cut the clip every 10 seconds? I don't get it. I really don't. So, but anyway, thank you guys for watching. Go bother GojiMan, and let's get him to eat some fish roe. I changed my mind, guys. I think GojiMan is a pawn that's been sent to us by the USDA and the World Health Organization to read dietary information straight from his textbook and answer questions for us. That's what I believe GojiMan is. I think he's I think he's a cyborg. I think he's composed of some sort of recyclable plant matter, and that they have to wind up his engine every 10 seconds and to keep him going. So that is my conclusion from this video. If there's any other questions you guys have, anything you guys would like me to answer in relation to this, please let me know.